Back in the day, Baltimore was a population of 950,000. They say between censuses during World War II, we were actually above 1 million people. As you know, since the 1950s, I'm not going to get into all the reasons, but a lot of people left the city. And now we are sitting, as of the 2020 census, at 593,000. So about 2/3 of what we were. And this I will get into. Here's your the classic redlining map from 1937, which tells a lot of the story of the work we do. As you can see, the neighborhoods in red and the neighborhoods in yellow were denied bank loans, long story short. And here is our current abandonment situation. These are vacant lots, vacant houses, and as you can see, it is pretty similar to that initial redlining map, which is no coincidence. So what happens is a lot of those vacant lots have turned into community managed open spaces. There are over 1,000 of these spaces in the city. Our database has about 400 at this point, and I'm trying to fill it out. So a little overview of our work. We work with gardens, we work with pocket parks, and we work with forests. We have 16 sites currently. We have 8 gardens, 5 pocket parks, 2 forests, and a horseshoe pit, which we don't really call either. It's a horseshoe pit. And of course, I'm the preservation manager. A little background on me. I've come a long way to get here, supplemented my education with urban planning work, environmental science, which I got my degree in, and all kinds of other things, which ended up getting me a job at NeighborSpace in Baltimore County, where I did some more hands-on work, essentially creating and improving parks. And that landed me at my current position as your preservation manager at Baltimore Green Space. So what does that mean? Essentially, I help preserve new sites, and I help the sites that we already have stay in good condition. Now, I really only help with the preservation process with the forest because we actually have a forest manager, Eric Fischel, who not only manages our 2 forests, but works with a network of over 30 other forests. I mainly deal with our 14 gardens and pocket parks and helping out other folks around the city who have gardens and pocket parks of their own. So a little thing we do, it's called the Quality Community Managed Open Space Process. It's every 6 months. We add to our list of community managed open spaces. As I was saying, we're shooting to get all 1,000 or so in the city in our database. But we focus on the quality spaces. You know, if it's being maintained actively, there are benches or the trees are being pruned, we'll consider this quality. And if it's a city managed space, we will send that information into the city. This is important because they've removed it from their actively marketed for sale list. So it's a first layer of protection. We do this for sites 3 years or older. And if you know any sites that might fit this description, please reach out to me. And we'll work on adding a layer of protection to these sites. This is an example of the list we send into the city. So that's my little bit. Any of you guys have questions of that? I'm sure many of you are familiar, but any quick questions before we move on to Sarah? All right. Well, Sarah, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Let me know. Can you guys see my presentation here?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Let me know. I don't know if I won't be able to see the chat or anything. So like if something goes wrong, please feel free just to shout it out. And we can troubleshoot.
Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Sarah, real quick. God, can everyone mute? A note from Linda. Can everyone please mute themselves? Thank you, guys. All right, back to you.
Awesome. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to come to this session. I'm super excited to talk with you guys about how to manage stormwater in your garden or in your backyard. My name is Sarah Emrich. I'm a water resources engineer at an environmental consulting firm called Biohabitats. Patrick and I actually grew up together, and it's super cool for me to see that, you know, we were friends in our youth, and as we've grown in our personal lives and our career, that, you know, taking care of the environment and working within Baltimore City is something that we're both passionate about, and really, we just want to save the world. So anyways, so a little more background on myself. As I said, I'm a water resources engineer at Biohabitats. Biohabitats is a firm, we're a small environmental consulting firm that we have offices all over the country, but our home base is really here in Baltimore and working with the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We're focused on restoring the earth and providing ecological stewardship. And a lot of the work that I do is within our environmental restoration program. So a lot of stream restoration, a lot of stormwater management, and that type of work. I have a background in nonprofit and stormwater management work. I worked at a small firm called the Low Impact Development Center a few years ago outside of Beltsville, Maryland. As well as some work with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and some of their watershed restoration efforts. I'm also an avid gardener. During the pandemic, when it first started, I took over my parents' backyard and made it my own little garden oasis, which has been super fun to test different things out, try out different produce and vegetables, see what works and doesn't work, as well as an outdoor enthusiast. So I love getting outside, whether it be on the water or on hikes, even though the Maryland heat can be a little rough in the summers, I really love to get outside whenever I can. So today I'm going to be talking about managing stormwater, and just to kind of take a step back, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the water cycle. I apologize, some of these images are a little bit blurry when they got blown up. But so the water cycle. So precipitation falls out of the sky, usually rain or snow, and it falls into the environment. And typically this precipitation becomes surface runoff, where it hits the surface and it will run off the surface. And it will go ultimately end up in our waterways, maybe a tributary or a creek that ultimately flows to a river or a lake or an ocean. It can also be infiltrated into the ground as groundwater. And that will also make its way to some of these waterways. Once it's in these waterways, it's usually evaporated and condensed in the sky. It can also be get back into the atmosphere by transpiration from plants and forests. And then once it's up in the atmosphere in the sky, it'll condense, and then precipitation will occur again. And so it's this beautiful, you know, circle of life water cycle. So to focus in a little bit, we're going to focus on stormwater runoff. And this is a fun diagram here that shows all different types of runoff. So as you can see here, we have runoff from roof surfaces, runoff from driveways, from sidewalks, from roads, and also from yards. So runoff typically occurs whenever there is an impervious surface. So that's a surface that doesn't allow for the water to be infiltrated into the ground. So, you know, your sidewalks, your roads, all of those types of things. And they increase the runoff. And as I said, prevent the water from infiltrating into the ground. This can really overload the drainage infrastructure that we have. And also, if you think about whenever that water is running off, whether it's running off of your yard or running off of a busy highway, it's picking up all of these pollutants and nutrients that are in the environment and bringing it with it. So if you're putting on fertilizer or pesticides on your yard, when the rain falls, it's going to pick up that excess fertilizer and bring it with it into the storm drain system. If someone's throwing trash in the road or there's trash on your driveway, it's going to get picked up. Unless it's really, really heavy, which still can be picked up, it'll be picked up by that runoff and ultimately make its way into the storm drain infrastructure. which ultimately outlets into a water body. So it's really important to be concerned with what that storm water runoff is picking up, because ultimately it is making its way into the waterways. So kind of take another quick step back. What is a watershed? So you've probably heard this term a lot, thinking about, you know, what watershed do you live in? Oftentimes we talk about the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And essentially a watershed is an area of land that separates waters that are flowing to different rivers or seas. So as you can see in this image here, any precipitation, so a raindrop, a snowflake that falls within this boundary here is going to ultimately end up in this water body. So usually this is due to topographic features. So if I'm a raindrop and I land in this forest up here, I'm going to make my way down to this tributary, into this river, and ultimately the water body. And same thing, if I'm a raindrop and I land in this more urban environment here, I'll probably make my way into the storm drain infrastructure, which is going to release into this water body. As well as even if I infiltrate into the groundwater, there's a good chance I'll make it into this water body as well. However, if you could imagine if this landscape kind of continued on over here, if I landed in this area, I'm probably going to make my way into a different water body because this is kind of a high point in the environment. So one thing I wanted to show you guys real quick, let's see if I can get this to open. So this is this really cool website called River Runner, and it can actually show you, you can pick a place in the environment and it shows you where that raindrop will ultimately end up. And I think this is a really great resource. You know, for us in the Baltimore area, we know that we're pretty close to the harbor, we're close to the bay. It's a little easier for us to visualize us being close to the environment. But if you're someone who, say, lives in Nebraska up here, it could be a little harder for you to understand how that water is making its way into a water body. So you can pick, I think this is a global website, but we'll just do Nebraska for an example. But so I clicked at this town in Norfolk, Nebraska, and it shows you where, if a raindrop were to fall, what is the path that that raindrop's going to take. So as you can see here, there's a number of creeks and rivers that ultimately get it out to the Mississippi River and then down to the Gulf of Mexico. And so I think, okay, I apologize, the connection's a bit wonky, so this might make people car sick, but it will actually follow and trace that path of where the water is going. So, you know, it's a great educational tool and just kind of helps to connect an individual with their impact and where that water is actually ending up. And you can see here from the map too, it's following that line. Now we won't go through a whole thing because it could take a while and it's a bit wonky. But yeah, it's a cool resource, and we can, just for kicks, let's see here. We'll go over to Baltimore. Let's get in here. And say we pick kind of somewhere in the northern part of the city here. So here, it's a little more basic since we're so close to our waterways here, but this is showing that it's, if you're in this part of the city, your runoff will make its way into the Jones Falls and then ultimately travel down to the Chesapeake Bay. So you can see it's a much shorter path than if we're in Nebraska, but yeah, just kind of a cool resource I wanted to share with you guys. All right, let's get back into this here. All right, so bringing it a little closer to home, the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So as you can see here, this is a map of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and there are a ton of states and areas that ultimately drain towards the Chesapeake Bay. I went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania, surrounded by farm fields, and I would have never known that that runoff that's happening in that environment is ultimately making its way down to the Chesapeake Bay. So it just kind of goes to show, you know, the impact that you have really can have a broad reach. And now honing a little bit more specifically into Baltimore. This is a map of some of the watersheds that are within Baltimore, within the city and the county. A lot of the times we talk about the Gwynns Falls and the Jones Falls, which are two really big watersheds in the city itself. And you can just kind of see here this layout and how different things run into each other. All right, so within Baltimore City, the Department of Public Works is the entity that manages the stormwater infrastructure in the city. And so they oversee all of the storm drains. You can see here from this graphic, inlets, the pipes, the manholes, the outfalls, and there is a ton that they manage, and there's a ton that is going on. They also manage a number of best management practices, what we would call BMPs, which are essentially techniques and practices that are used to help prevent the pollution that's caused by that stormwater runoff. So if you think back to that previous slide where you know, the runoff is picking up pollutants from your yard or maybe the busy highway and bringing that into the storm drain infrastructure. Some of these BMPs are practices that are helping to try to eliminate some of that pollution and take some of that stress off of the infrastructure. And we'll get into that in the next couple of slides about how you can actually implement some of these best management practices in your own environment, in your own yard. The Baltimore City Stormwater Fee is a fee that helps to fund and bring money to the Department of Public Works to help them manage all of this infrastructure. And every homeowner, property owner is charged a city stormwater fee, in case you didn't know. And it's based on the impervious area of your property. So it can range from $4 to about $15 a month, depending on how much impervious area you have. So as I talked about earlier, the more, you know, if you have a property that has a lot of green space, a lot of open land, and opportunity for that runoff to soak up into the environment or soak up into the ground and infiltrate, then you're going to have a lower fee than if you were to have a property that is, you know, fully paved, there's sidewalks or a huge driveway that's covering that whole area. There is a stormwater fee finder, in case you don't know what that fee is that you're paying, that I'll include. We'll send out some resources after this, and a link to that we'll include there. But I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't know, if you're oh, is there a question? No? Okay, I'll keep going. But yeah, wanted to let you know that there is this stormwater fee. But never fear, there is a program where citizens can apply for a stormwater fee reduction or credit. And so this is going to be a reduction in that charge that's granted to a customer for measures that they're implementing that help to reduce the demand on the city's drainage system or reduce the cost of managing that infrastructure. So this is a program that really helps to incentivize homeowners to take a stance in protecting the water quality in their neighborhoods and their environment. And I'll get into the specifics of this, but it's helping to create some equity in the payment system, and it's ultimately reducing public expenditures on the stormwater management infrastructure and helping to promote some of that more private management of the stormwater runoff. A lot of different cities and municipalities have similar kind of fee reduction programs. When I used to work in Prince George's County, that was a big thing that I worked on, was helping to promote and spread educational information about their reduction program. And there's also a number of senior and low income discounts and exemptions available for certain types of properties. So today I'm going to focus on diving into the single family property program. However, there is also a program for non-single family properties, and I'll make sure that that guidance and information gets sent out to everyone attending today who's interested. And so there's a couple different ways that you can participate in the program and receive some of that stormwater fee credit. The first is through public participation. And this is volunteering for different programs or things that are happening within the city. So this is awesome because it's an opportunity for someone that might not have the resources to, build one of these actual residential facilities at their home, but they can volunteer in these programs and still receive credit. So these include different stream cleanups, tree plantings, all different types of events, as well as being able to apply and host your own event. So you could host an event within your community to help receive credit for some of these fees. What I'm really going to focus on today are the simple residential BMPs, or best management practices. And these include rain gardens, planting trees and other native species, and rainwater harvesting systems. There are opportunities for other types of residential best management practices that are a little more complicated that homeowners can have on their property. And there's some more information about that. They have to be facilities that are approved by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and they're a little more complex. So today we're just going to focus on those couple I have highlighted. So first, let's talk about rain barrels. So a rain barrel is a system that collects and temporarily stores rainwater from roofs to be used to water green space. So it can be used to water your garden, lawns, trees, maybe wash your car or different things. As you can see from these images, it's a pretty basic system. It allows for some, could be some artistic opportunity if you want to paint the rain barrels. It can be all different types of systems. But one thing to note is that if you want to use the water that you're collecting for potable purposes, that water should be treated before being used for those purposes. In order to receive credit for the Baltimore City program, you also have to have a minimum of 50 gallons that can be collected and stored in your rain barrel. So to kind of break down a rain barrel system, they're pretty basic, pretty straightforward. You can buy a full system, turnkey that's already has all the pieces in place, and they can range from $100 to a couple $100 for a more complex system. But as you can see from this diagram, the individual pieces are pretty basic and relatively inexpensive to actually build your own rain barrel system. So the pieces that you would want to make sure you have if you're interested in building a rain barrel is you're going to have your inlet, which would most likely be your downspout that's coming off of your roof or other impervious area. You'll want to have a screen that is screening what's coming in from the inlet into the barrel to help prevent debris or leaves or whatever might be collecting in there so that it doesn't get into the collection system itself. And then you have your barrel. As you saw from the previous slides, those big blue 50-gallon drums can be a perfect barrel. You'll have your outlet. So typically this is going to be a faucet that you can connect to your hose. So you can then use that water, but it can be kind of whatever you want. And then one thing that's important to have is an overflow. So in case the water that you're collecting, it's more water than you can use at a given time, you want to have this overflow system here that will allow for that overflow to go out, maybe into your yard or to another rain barrel to prevent backup and clogging from going back up into the downspout. And another thing is you might want to think about having some type of elevation, maybe a couple cinder blocks or a raised platform that helps that gravity flow. Next, I want to talk about rain gardens. So as you can see here, this is a beautiful photo of a rain garden that is in use when the photo was taken. A rain garden is a depressed area of ground that's planted with vegetation, and it allows for runoff from impervious surfaces to be collected and then infiltrate into that ground or evaporated. So right now you can see in this image that there is standing water in the rain garden. Traditionally, rain gardens aren't built to hold standing water, but this is clearly going on during a storm or right after a storm event. So it's received all of that runoff, and it's in the process of allowing that runoff to infiltrate into the ground. Rain gardens are great because you can really get creative with the gardens. It's an opportunity to add in all different types of native vegetation. You can add in different features. I've seen people get creative with, stone patterns and all, birdhouses, all different types of things. So it's an opportunity to add some unique landscaping to your property, as well as knowing that you're helping to better the environment. A couple tidbits about receiving credit for rain gardens is that if you want to have, for a small rain garden, it needs to be a minimum size of 50 square feet, and it needs to treat a minimum drainage area of 500 square feet. And for a larger rain garden, it needs to have a minimum size of 100 square feet and treat a minimum drainage area of 1,000 square feet. So this is just a little more detailed diagram of a basic rain garden that I'll kind of walk us through. So as you can see, there is an inlet. In this case, it's a building downspout that's going into the rain garden. You can also have overflow that's coming over from the just from the yard. Things that I've seen a lot of times too is sometimes there'll be a downspout on a building, and then there's kind of like a channel or a swale, maybe with some cobblestone that is helping to, push that water into the rain garden. You're usually going to have a layer of mulch that is on top of the rain garden to help promote plant growth. You want to make sure you know that the shrubs and grasses and vegetation that you have in your rain garden are tolerant of both wet and dry conditions. And then you'll have some compost or amended soil underneath. And then depending on the type of system you have and what your soil is, what the soil you're starting with, you might have like a sand layer or some other type of amenities that help the soil, help the runoff to infiltrate into the ground. This diagram is kind of a step up rain garden that includes an overflow inlet and an underdrain. So in this diagram, you can see this kind of inlet channel that I was talking about, a stone lined swale or something that helps direct the water to your rain garden. In this case, we have a overflow inlet that, if you're in an area where your rain garden is significantly sizable or it gets a lot of runoff coming to it, and you're concerned about, if the rain garden overflows, where's that water going to go and is it going to cause damage? You can have an overflow inlet that will be at a certain height and will allow for, if that water level gets up, it'll go into the overflow inlet and then that will be discharged somewhere. So usually it might go to a storm drain or to another rain garden or to another facility. So if you decide that you want to build a rain garden, there's a couple things you want to consider in terms of actually constructing your rain garden. One of the most important is your I think can everyone just make sure they're on mute unless you guys have a question or anything? Awesome. Thank you so much. So thinking about site selection, where do you want to put your rain garden? Is there an area that is already kind of low lying, or is there an area that standing water tends to accumulate after big storm events? Is there adequate sun? What is the shade looking like? Because you want to make sure that the vegetation that you put in your rain garden is going to be successful. And also, is it downslope from your inlet? So thinking about, how is that, if your water that you're collecting and going to treat in your rain garden is going to be coming from your downspout, how is that water from the downspout ultimately going to get into the rain garden? Once you've figured out the site that you want to use, you then want to prepare your soil. So first you're going to remove any lawn or vegetation that is at the top. And then you want to dig out to a depth of about 6 inches, which in this case is kind of that ideal storage to mosquito avoidance depth. And then you want to make sure you construct your side slopes so that it is going to the center where that will be the deepest part of your rain garden. And then in terms of soil selection, you want to make sure that it allows for slow infiltration into the ground. So typically kind of clay soil works best. But if you do have more of a loose sandy soil, you just might need to add some additives or extra stuff into that soil to allow for good infiltration. And then usually you want to have some type of compost or topsoil and mulch on top to help encourage and promote that plant growth. But something you want to keep in mind is that you want to make sure you maintain that depth, because a lot of times what I've seen is, there's a beautiful rain garden, but there's no ponding depth because people have put in a ton of mulch, which is great, but then you're not allowing for that ponding to accumulate during those big storm events. And then last but not least, the most exciting part, you want to add in your native flowering plants and grasses. As I mentioned, you want to make sure that these species are able to tolerate both wet and dry circumstances. And, you really get creative. You can have a lot of fun with this, and you can showcase a lot of different types of native species within these rain gardens. And so kind of shifting a little more towards native plants, as I'm sure you guys are aware, it's really important to use native species, whether it be in your rain garden or your garden at home or your landscaping, because it helps to support native ecosystems and wildlife and really preserve that, native biodiversity for the area. Typically, native species are low impact, so they're really sustainable and they can avoid invasive spreading. Specifically, tree plantings are eligible to receive credit for the Baltimore City Stormwater Fee Reduction Program. And in order to be eligible, you have to plant a minimum of 2 trees. They have to be planted after 2010, and the diameter has to be 1 inch or greater. And they have to conform to the city landscaping guidelines. And, having these native plants, it's really awesome opportunities for urban meadows. As Patrick talked about, there's a number of these vacant areas in the city that have been converted to green spaces and these little parks, pop-up parks that are around. And it's awesome not only because it's helping the environment, but just to, have a nice place to hang out, to walk through, to be used for educating school kids and all different types of stuff. And having that ground cover can be really valuable. You may have heard of the no-mow kind of terminology, and the idea behind that is having areas with native species that you avoid mowing and cutting down with a lawnmower. And it's funny, I feel like a lot of times people consider these no-mow areas to be like messy or really unaesthetically pleasing, but there's definitely ways to add some control to these native areas and natural areas and allow for some beauty and order to these no-mow areas. There's a ton of resources available that can give you more information about specific different types of native plants and native species. A lot of local nurseries. Herring Run is an awesome nursery in the area, and they have volunteer events and lots of opportunities to get native species, as well as just a couple here, the University of Maryland Extension Program, which I've used a lot in my own personal work in my family's garden. So I really want to emphasize that you as an individual do have an impact on your environment. I think oftentimes, there's a lot going on in the world, and it's hard to feel like you as just one person can make a difference, but you really can. Whether it be constructing a best management practice at your home, like we talked about, or if that's not necessarily accessible to you, doing some of these volunteering opportunities, participating in plantings and cleanups. These small changes and impacts really equate to a substantial impact and can really have, positive impact on the environment. And also education. And I think, by the fact that you guys took your lunch break to be here today, to educate yourself, spread the word, talk to your family, your friends, your neighborhood about things that you guys might be able to do to help have a more positive impact on the environment. There's a program, you guys have probably seen some of these storm drain art pieces that are all around the city. And I think they're great because, it's allowing an opportunity to connect with the public, with what's actually happening in their environment, and how, you might think, oh, if I throw this piece of litter onto the street, like it's just going to disappear and out of sight, out of mind. But, when the stormwater runoff picks that up and brings it through this storm drain infrastructure, it's not out of, it's going into the waterways. And then unfortunately that can have a huge detrimental impact. So, spread the word, educate, tell your neighbors, tell everyone that you should care about your impact. Awesome. Well, that was all I had. Thank you for listening and giving me the opportunity to share with you guys. And I'm happy to answer any questions or if anyone has any thoughts or comments.
Sarah, I think thank you so much. I think we'll start from the chat. I'm gonna read some in the chat you want to answer, and then we can have people add additional questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. So let's see what we have. Yes, River Runner. Peter Conrad was asking if you can find this information in the water bill. I am working with my church and church property. Peter, do you want to remind us what that question was about?
Well, I think it's just about, we had applied for lowering our water fee because we had done some stormwater work. And I just wanted to know if the water bill that's coming to the church would have the information on it about what our current discount is.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if it would necessarily be it may be in the water bill. I'm not totally sure, but there's definitely ways that you can find out what what you're paying, and then it should, it's called the Stormwater Fee Finder, and I think you can put in your account number and it will reflect if you're receiving that credit or not. So we'll be sure to send that link along with the resources. But I think I've seen the website before and I've used it for my parents' property, that you're able to input that account number and see it. So I don't know if I would think it would be reflected on the bill, but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
The bill does show the stormwater fee. I'm looking at my water bill right here.
Oh, awesome.
Line item, and my stormwater fee is $6.50. $6.50. That's per month. It doesn't show any reduction. That's because I guess I haven't done anything that would reduce it.
Yeah. So yeah, I would imagine that if you did have a reduction, it would be reflected in that.
Cool. So Karen asked, if I have a driveway put in that was one that lets the water seep through, permeable, would that be something where you could get a reduction in that fee?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm having like a permeable pavement for your driveway. I believe that you would be able to get a reduction fee. I'd have to confirm by looking into some of the guidelines. I think that would fall under one of the other best management practices, because having something like that is obviously a little more complex than a rain barrel or something. But I want to say 99% sure that you should be able to receive credit for that. And I'll send out, make sure you guys have access to the application for receiving that credit. And the big thing is just making sure that you can show that that this facility or your pavement is helping to limit the runoff that's going into the environment.
Cool. Chloe asked, any recommendations of where, if any, local places to buy rain barrels or good online sources? Karen said Gardner's Supply. Do you know of any others, or does anybody else?
Yeah, Gardner's Supply is great. I mean, to be honest, most of the systems that I've seen and I've worked with myself have been systems that we've just made on our own. So, you know, getting a rain barrel, getting a screen, or cutting some type of material to the size that we want, and then adding in that outlet and overflow. So there definitely are, I'm sure if you did a Google search, you know, since they are relatively straightforward systems, I think there's probably a lot of manufacturers out there that make good, reliable systems.
Cool. Karen says, I found out my community association has a piece of land as a buffer between residential area and commercial. Is this something that you would be looking at?
So I think if I understand correctly, like, would this be an area that you could implement a facility to then receive credit for?
No, I was just wondering about your organization, whether you would do something with that, or do we do something with it? Or I don't think anybody's done anything with it for as long as I've been here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, my Biohabitats, my work itself, we work on all different types of projects. So if you're interested in, like, specifically seeing what opportunities might arise for my company, like, definitely feel free to shoot me an email and we can kind of talk more offline about that. But I think that, I mean, if it is a public area, I think that you should be able, if you're implementing a facility that's going to be benefiting the environment, you know, there's always red tape and things you have to cross. But I would imagine that that would be an area that would be a great opportunity to implement, you know, a rain garden or some type of system, especially if it's backing up to a commercial facility that's probably going to be generating a lot of excess runoff and pollution itself. That sounds like it could be a great opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Keandra Pryor said, can you talk about permeable surfaces for driveways, parking pads, that okay for the city? Oh, she says, do you have any recommendations for companies that do this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Permeable pavement is definitely something that's up and coming, and, you know, a really easy way to help better your impact. I don't have any recommendations off the top of my head right now, but that's definitely something I can follow up with. I think the thing that can be tough about permeable pavement that I've seen is it's definitely costly. You know, it's going to cost more money to construct and implement this type of system. But I think it does pay off in the end. And, you know, thinking about that environmental impact you're having, it's hard to put a monetary value on it, but it's huge. Something though that I've seen that can become an issue is if permeable pavement isn't maintained. So you want to make sure, if you do have a permeable system, that you're making sure it's not getting clogged. Sometimes weeds can kind of grow in between pavers and stuff. And so sometimes, you know, it's great if you have that system, but it's only going to be functioning as well as it's maintained. But in terms of more like specific companies that can construct those systems, I'll definitely follow up with some resources.
Right on. Chloe asked, what kind of volunteer events is Baltimore Green Space doing this year? I'll answer that. Chloe, we do a lot of events in the gardens. However, most of them are just within the community. We don't need a ton of extras. The best place for events that we have is on our forest properties or in our forest network. And Lynette Hodge, our operations manager, has just, you know, made sure all the information is on the website. We also send out monthly blasts. So please, yeah, follow that and you'll see opportunities for volunteering. Erica Denner mentioned there's lots of blue barrels for sale on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, etc. Thanks, Erica. Mary with Herring Run Nursery says they sometimes have them. Cool. Hard to read, so that's all the questions in the chat. I'll open up the floor for any additional questions.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
this is not a question. It's some information.
Yes, sir.
Baltimore City and Baltimore County this spring sponsored having, they sent out a flyer that Environ World, located in Canada, they had worked with them to sell rain barrels in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. You could order them through them and they would be delivered to your house. I think this was the first year that they did it, and perhaps next spring they will be doing it again. So you may want to just keep your eyes open next spring to see if they are selling them. I ended up buying one, and it's a well-constructed rain barrel. It came complete with everything that was needed. A 50 or 55 gallon drum. So that might be something to keep an eye out next spring.
Can you send me like the contact or information for that after this, and I'll.
Yeah, sure, be glad to.
Great, I'll include it in the follow-up email, which I'll be sending out later this week. Okay. Anybody else? I see Jan wants to come back and ask a question. In the meantime, any other questions? Anyone? All right, well, Sarah, thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. I'm really excited to have Sarah here. As she mentioned, we've known each other for a long time. And it was great. This is my second virtual workshop with Baltimore Green Space. I'm hoping to host an additional one. The hope is in September. I'm talking with someone about a workshop on, it will be all things bees and beekeeping. So hopefully that will work out. Otherwise, we will have another workshop. I'm aiming to do them every couple months. And we will be, now that we're moving out of COVID, we will be talking more about also having some on the ground workshops. Again, looks like Jan is making it back. So I wanted to thank everyone else for being here. It's been great having you. Please keep following us, and we'll be sending a follow-up email shortly. Sarah, anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thanks so much for coming. Oh, I think Jan is back.
Yeah, one last question. Jan, you're up. Yeah. Oh dear.
I think she was asking about commercial stormwater management ponds. So there are big commercial stormwater management ponds. What do I know about stormwater management ponds? So I know a bit about stormwater management ponds. So typically, you're going to have these bigger ponds in either like if you have a big commercial space, or a lot of times in big neighborhoods to help handle the runoff from that environment in that neighborhood. There's lots of different types of ponds. Kind of the two big ones are a dry pond or a wet pond. Oh, are you nodding your head, Patrick?
Well, also retention or detention or other.
Retention. Yeah. So they can be handled to either kind of like a rain garden, infiltrate all of that water so there's not standing water there, or to actually hold the water. So I wasn't sure, did you have a like specific question about who inspects them for functionality? That's a great question. So it depends on the area. So for example, my company has a couple of contracts with a couple local municipalities where we'll actually go out on, you know, a yearly or every couple of year basis to inspect the facility. Sometimes, usually when a facility is inspected, the contractor who either built it or designed the system will have like a maintenance contract for a couple of years to come out the first few years it's been built, to perform those inspections. But then following that, it'll usually be another contracted entity that will perform the inspection. Sometimes it's the municipality or organization itself. There are 3 stormwater managed.
Right by you, Sarah.
Well, you know, if I can take a look. If you had, if you wouldn't mind like sharing the specific area, you know, we can kind of dig into who should be in charge of those facilities.
Hopefully not biohabitats. Hopefully.
No. If we were, I would know if we were in charge with maintaining those facilities. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times, especially if the municipality is in charge of performing the inspections, they tend to just be overloaded with work and they don't have the capacity and resources to perform consistent inspections, which is unfortunate because it's one of those things that they're really valuable and have an impact on the environment, but oftentimes there's just not the resources to maintain and perform those inspections.
Thank you for that, Jan. Yeah, so another very important topic that we could definitely homeowner design. Oh, that's a good one. Tom said, is there a resource to help a homeowner design a small rain garden?
Yeah, so we'll provide that the guidance document, and then it also references, I believe it's the Maryland Department of the Environment, they have a whole document that details all different types of like design guidelines and stuff, and there are guidelines in there for a more basic rain garden. So we'll be sure to send that reference out as well.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else going once? Yes, they do. That is very true. Yes. Yes, Montgomery County, the envy of Maryland when it comes to environmental procedures for sure. Going twice. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, Sarah, going twice. What's the impact on the environment when the SM pond is not working?
Yeah, so really just like when any facility isn't working, you know, it's not helping to prevent that pollution. So it's just increased pollution and runoff that's going into the environment. So usually if a facility is more of a passive facility, it might not necessarily be generating more pollution than what would have happened or would have run off if it wasn't there. But it can definitely be detrimental because it, you know, was put there for a reason to treat runoff and pollution. And if it's not functioning how it should be, then that water's not getting treated. Who do you report it to? That's a great question. I'd say maybe if you can talk to your, you know, neighborhood district representative, that could be someone to kind of help get the concern to the front of the line, the top of the very deep pile of concerns. But I would recommend.
How about Blue Water?
Yeah, Blue Water Baltimore. I think that's a great resource. Yeah, definitely reaching out to these like community and city organizations that want to help. So
great. All right. All right, we're out of time. All right, thank you everyone. for being here. Again, we really appreciate you, and join us for the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.